Hey guys, what's up? All right, so today, the rundown. I'm actually gonna invert the order, I believe, as it's listed on the syllabus. We're gonna start with talking about research because I feel like that's the most pressing thing that we need to discuss, right? Like the stage we're at, we're gonna leap into your papers. To do that in any way, shape, or form, you need to be able to perform research. I want to start the video with that. At the end, just a couple of minutes on brainstorming. Normally, I would do that part for longer, but since it's just me talking at you as opposed to us having a conversation about it, I feel like it would get pretty monotonous to just have me basically listing people at you. So, yeah, to begin with, research. For this particular assignment, it's going to probably feel a little bit atypical. Usually, when I talk to my classes about research, the first move would be this. And you go to the library website, and West Georgia has a great library with all kinds of access to different databases, things like this. And by the way, you can still use the library website because, as I just said, they have a lot of great stuff. However, in most of my classes and in most of the classes you encounter in your travels, you're going to do the kind of research, you're going to be writing the kind of papers that would necessitate the library. Okay. For this particular paper, I mean, what are we really talking about? We're talking about people who basically have screwed up on Twitter, right? Okay. Um, and in that case, what better place than Google? Now, before we get into it, I should give you a few caveats, and these actually extend to like the library as well. You have to the best of your ability, use your best judgment. Okay. And what I mean by that is this is kind of where papers 1 and 2 come into play for this one. Think when you're reading an article, whatever it might be, what is that article's goals? Every article is making some kind of an argument. Sometimes they're very overt, as we'll see here in a minute. Other times, it's less obvious, but it can be something as mundane as like if it's an encyclopedia entry, you would say, well, that's not making an argument. It totally is. It's arguing, first of all, that it's worth listening to and that it's accurate. It is making that argument. Now, of course, it's on you as a reader to judge that argument, to sort of critique it in your own head and decide if it's useful, if it's worth trusting, all these things. But you have to, again, to the best of your ability, use the skills that we worked on thus far and apply it to your research to vet your sources. Okay. So what does any of that look like? Well, to begin with, I wanted to give you guys one more example. We talked about Carlton Davis last time, cornerback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, Honestly, in my opinion, seems like a decent guy, just screwed up online. Happens. Today, I'm going to go probably a little bit back in time for most of you to a person that it's unlikely you've heard of, probably. Um, but to do that, I actually wanted to try. I have not tested this. I kind of want to see what I have a suspicion of what will happen when I do this. Let's see. Ah, that's her. Okay. So Justine Sacco, which that's her. Um, and you see the tweet. Well, let's go ahead and show you the tweet because you can kind of see it down here. She tweeted this in, just let me, please, in 2013. Okay. And yeah, you know, it's not a good look by any means. And yeah, so let's start there. Let's go back to, well, actually, here, let's do a better search now. The reason I did that, I remembered her name because it was super famous. It was 2013. Um, I was right about your age, actually, most of you in 2013. So it was kind of a big deal at the time. Um, but part of the point I wanted to make to you real quick, it's still so famous. It's still such sort of a known thing that just typing in Africa tweet, she was the first result, right? I'm pretty sure there's been a ton of tweets in Africa about Africa. It's kind of a continent, you know. Um, but yeah, hers still comes to the top, and maybe for obvious reasons, as we just read the tweet. Yeah, but it's also 2013. That's almost 10 years ago. Like, that's a long time. For most of you, you know, you're 18, 19 years old. That's half your life. That's a long time. And it's still the number one result. So, what about that? Well, the other way to spin this, pretending for a second I couldn't remember her name, you could just search, you know, if you have like you kind of remember that that's kind of the beautiful thing about Google. If you have a little bit of time and you're like, ah, I remember somebody said this thing, but I don't remember who it was, blah, blah, blah. You can just kind of search for some of the details and you can oftentimes root out whoever that person was, right? You can go find the thing. But in this case, we looked up Justine Sacco and we have all these sources. We have images as well, but of course, we're mainly interested in the articles. So, where do we go from here? Well, first of all, we're thinking about vetting our sources, and you can do this in a couple ways. Honestly, the half the approach I'm going to give you is just trying to save a little bit of time. So think about where the sources are coming from. And by the way, you'll notice most of these. This one's from 2021, which is wild. That is hella recent, obviously. Um, Again, for something that occurred in 2013, we're still writing about it in late 2021. That should tell you something, right? Um, Actually, I'm kind of interested in that, so we'll open that in a different tab. But New York Times, The Sun, Vox, BuzzFeed, some of you will scoff at, but I actually happen to know that's a good article. We'll look at that as well. Washington Post is a good article. Okay. So, sorry about that. I should say now, I, okay, I know it's not private. Thank you. Um, I should say now, it probably sounds like I just looked at where these articles came from and opened them. That was half of what I was doing as I was talking to you. I was also reading the titles. That one could be interesting, but I kind of feel like it'll get covered. Um, so these are good sources. There was one more I saw. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, because that guy, the writer of that one, actually. Okay, so what you would not do in your paper is use all these, right? But you kind of open them. You based upon the titles, they could be useful. I'm telling you right now, a lot of these are going to cover similar ground. So that would mean maybe we would pick one that like covers the same kind of stuff, you know, and just eliminate the others. But what are they doing? Well, this one, how one stupid tweet blew up Justine Sacco's life, sounds a lot like it's going to give us the history of the thing that she did, but then also what happened as a result. So that could be useful. That kind of sounds like the same thing, but again, one's from 2015, one's from 2021. So I'm kind of interested in if they approach it at all differently. You know, that's 6 years difference. That's interesting. That honestly, just that this article even exists, so that's worth thinking about. Vox is a pretty good website. I didn't use it because in this particular, I want that to stop loading. In this particular exercise, because it sounds a lot like some of the other stuff we've pulled up, but I could open it and check it out. BuzzFeed is good. Again, I happen to know what this article is, but it also sounds like background, so we'll look at it. This one, I can just tell. It doesn't even give us the whole title. We can look at it here. Wait, that's not the right one. Sorry. There it is. Here's the full title. Twitter's outrage machine should be stopped, but Justine Sacco is the wrong poster child. So this one, just from the title, tells you a couple things. It tells you probably it's going to talk a little bit about the background, and really all of these are because it's kind of hard to just jump into the conversation, right? But this one in particular makes an argument, right? Some of these may make an argument as well. You know, we'd have to get into them to see. But this one from the very top is telling us we should do a thing, right? But we should also not do this thing. It's kind of making two arguments just there in the title. So that tells me this writer is going to take a particular position, and that's worth thinking about. So I'm almost absolutely going to use this one. All right, but let's start back kind of at square one here. I got to drink something. Hang on, sorry. All right. So a little bit of background, and I think, is this the BuzzFeed? Yeah. Okay. So the reason I like the BuzzFeed article, which is from, is it? Oh, it's from 2013. So this is current. All right. This happened. They wrote this article in the same year as when she tweeted it. This one is pretty much just informational, and what I like about it, you'll see. Um, we start with her tweet, okay, because that's how all of it starts. She's going from London to Cape Town, South Africa. She tweets this, which, again, not the best move, but it kind of walks you through how it goes from this, which, by the way, she only has 200 followers, right? How it goes from this to, quite honestly, going viral. It blows up all over the world, and they walk you through how that happens, like kind of the play-by-play that day. So this one guy tweets a thing about it. Like this one reporter retweets it. Somehow he gets a hold of it. Then other people kind of find it based upon him. See, they're breaking it down here as well. A bunch of people responding. It's kind of building. More reporters find it, so they tweet it out too, and other people. Now it's just snowballing, right? All these people are seeing it. And by the way, I should point out, and I believe they mentioned it somewhere in here, a big part of the story. She tweeted this and then got an 11-hour flight, and this is 2013. There was no internet on flights in 2013. So she's on this really long plane ride and has no idea that this, pardon the pun, but this tweet is like taking off, right? That everybody is seeing it and having definite thoughts about it. Um, Now at this point in the article, they start to track kind of the evolving opinion about this lady's tweet, okay? A lot of people are just like, man, is she really this stupid? Like, what's going on? Um, then people get pissed, start calling for a job, right? I mean, you can read some of these as I scroll. There's that was pretty to the point, right? Okay, some people are like, hey, maybe she got hacked. Surely she's not so insane that she would post this. So, so maybe somebody is like playing a prank on her, basically. All right. More people pick it up. All right, now she's trending in South Africa, which is where she's going. So that'll be fun when she gets there. Um, and then this started. I remember this hashtag, because again, the whole world, and there's a map in here somewhere we'll look at. The whole world starts tracking her flight, and then this hashtag, because everyone is waiting, not just how do I put this? They're waiting for her to get off that flight, reconnect to the internet, and find out, right, that her life is very different from what it was when she took off in London. Yeah. Again, originally she tweeted this, 200 followers, um, not huge by any stretch, but it's across the world now, and everyone is waiting to see what happens. Basically, it was like a weird little reality show. Here's all the places she was being talked about. A lot in America, obviously South Africa, pretty big in Europe. I mean, she did leave from there. Kind of, I mean, again, worldwide. um, Oh, and I should say too, there were reporters at the airport when she got there. It turned into such a thing that some news outlets managed to get to the airport she was headed to before her. And again, they're waiting on her to land. There you go. They're talking about how there's no Wi-Fi. All right. We're scrolling. I'm trying. I mean, again, this is a lot of like people wondering now, what is she going to do when she lands? Uh, Businesses and celebrities get in on it, which is always interesting. All right, let's scroll through some of this. Oh, yeah, that's how that's going to go when she lands. There's this. Hang on. Now, again, I should point out we wouldn't use a lot of this, and honestly, for a paper, we may not use this article at all, but it can be super helpful just for us. Like personally, for me, I keep saying this happened in 2013. That's a long time ago. I remember some of it. I don't remember all of it. So just taking a good like 10 minutes looking through some of this can help you get a better sort of concrete sense of how this goes. You know, like, oh, I forgot that she didn't have Wi-Fi and that was part of it. You know, I forgot. Yeah. Let me see. Okay, so when she lands, obviously, she deletes the tweet, she deletes all of her social media. She goes dark. And they point out without an apology, and I would point out, well, if she deletes all of her stuff, how could she, like, it wouldn't stay up, you know? So, but anyway, um, now she's on news outlets, like actually like on TV, people are talking about her. Oh yeah, she's more popular than Justin Bieber for a couple days, which is wild in 2013. Um, I think that's mostly it. Yeah. Oh, here's all the places where the hashtag was trending. It's basically everywhere there where people were talking about her, right? There's her mentions. Um, yeah. Oh, and then she gets fired. The next day she gets fired. Um, then a while later she apologizes to a newspaper and then to ABC News. And again, I've seen some people take issue with how long her apology takes, but bear in mind she's not on social media at this point, right? So she's talking to old school news, and I mean that just takes longer, so that you'd have to factor that in. This is her apology, um, and she says she's sorry, basically, and that's it. So again, some of this could potentially be used in a paper, specifically for background information, right? But I think mostly an article like this is useful just to fill in gaps in your own knowledge, right? If you were to write about a person like this. And I mentioned this at the top, some of you may scoff at the whole BuzzFeed News thing. First of all, that is a thing, and it's actually gotten even more reputable than it was in 2013. But also, if you're trying to research a story about somebody who really screwed up on social media in some way, shape, or form, wouldn't BuzzFeed honestly be like a great place to start? Like that's kind of a lot of what they do. In some ways, you know, the New York Times obviously wrote about her as well, but I mean, this is BuzzFeed's thing, man. So yeah, BuzzFeed is totally fine. Now, all that said, I gotta take a drink again. Sorry. All that said, because it was such a story, and I suppose continues to be because 2021 they're writing about her as well. Um, the Sun is a little more tabloidy, by the way, but it could still. I mean, I get well. You know, this is actually kind of useful, I suppose, because it breaks it down really quickly. It's sort of like it's sort of like the BuzzFeed article, but way less detailed. So maybe that could have a use for you as well, in the same way that the BuzzFeed article was useful. Again, I don't know that we would use it in a paper, but all right. Let's go here. So the New York Times article is probably going to be longer, and as a result of it's by John Ronson. It's by the same guy. I wonder if these are the same article actually. I can't make. Can I make that go away? Oh, there we go. It's not. So he's writing multiple. This guy's written a book about stuff like this, by the way. But he's writing multiple articles here. What I would say, especially since we've noticed it's the same author, we're probably not going to use both, right? Just again to save you some time. Based upon the titles, this one sounds like it makes a little bit of an argument because it says one stupid tweet blew up her life. Okay, that kind of communicates to me he thinks maybe things went too far for that. More on that in a second. This other one is very open. Like if this one implies this one is explicit about, you know, we should kind of let this go for this person. This is in 2015, so it's basically 2 years later. And again, oh, it mentions here that he wrote a book on public shaming, right? Um, so I wonder, we would scroll some. Again, all this is background about her. and probably about him as well. Oh, so okay, they're interviewing him. Well, he's gonna give his direct thoughts then about it. Let's scroll into because now they're talking about his book, right? It's helpfully bolded. The questions are. Let me see. Keep scrolling. Okay, so we're talking about redemption now. There's Monica Lewinsky. Da, da, da. So most of this isn't really about her. I mean, it kind of starts to be down here, but he's talking more broadly. It seems I'm skimming. He's speaking more broadly about um, sort of public shaming in general, right? Um, and again, that could be part of your argument. Like when I say, what does any of this say about us as a people, a society, a culture? It's not just this person did a bad thing and these people reacted, right? It always has to come back to your argument does. What does their reaction say about us? Why do we do this? Why do we, in this woman's case, Justine Sacco, why? I'm trying to think of a way to, like, if you're going to play devil's advocate, right? Obviously, what she said is awful. Like, that's easy. And if we borrow John Oliver's kind of framework a little bit, like, I think what happens to her is pretty warranted. Like for the way people react to it and such vitriol like that, a lot of that seems pretty fair considering what she said. Okay, but then the question becomes, I mean, if we're thinking about Oliver's framework, one of the questions he raises is why do we publicly shame, right? Like, is it just about punishment, or is it about changing behavior? Is it about um, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. So if it is that second one, then if it's not just punishment, if it's about like making people better in some way, then doesn't that kind of dictate an end to the punishment? You know what I mean? Like for her to receive all this hate over what she said, supposing she could learn from that and do better or whatever, right? Isn't that the goal? I'm asking. If it is, then at some point do you have to forgive that person? And if so, like to allow them to try to be better, if so, what does it say about us if we don't? Do you take my point, right? Like the question becomes, are we really publicly shaming to try to alter behavior, to try to make people better, or is there another reason? And that's one of the big questions that you would have to try to answer in this woman's case. Every case is going to be a little bit different, right? It really depends upon who you're looking up, what they did, and again, what the reaction was. And yeah, they're talking. So what's kind of cool about this article? They're talking about public shaming in general. That would mean we may actually be able to use this one from the same guy because he. It seems like this is more specific to Sacco herself, and he's giving you a lot of background. So that tells me we could absolutely just not use either one of those, right? Any background we want, we could pretty much get from here. I don't know what that's about. So he's talking a lot about shaming again. Oh, this is the woman who, yeah, lots of people messing up online, basically. So that would be worth investigating, right? Lastly, we have this one. This one is very different. This guy takes the opposite approach, and this is from 2015, so it's also basically 2 years later. And again, I mean, it helps, if nothing else, to say, people are still writing about this woman and what she did. So he kind of sums up his argument actually really helpfully right here. He's going to talk about public shaming in general. He thinks it should stop. So it seems like he agrees with this other guy about that. But he feels like Justine Sacco is the wrong person for that conversation. So basically, we should stop doing this to each other, but maybe we should keep doing it to her, essentially. What does he say about it? This is kind of his thesis, I guess. She's white, well off, and already has a new job. Why is Justine Sacco our poster child for victims of public shaming? I actually have thoughts about that, but let's scroll a little bit. So again, he's gonna break down what happened. Again, all these articles are gonna have to do that, so you can kind of skip a lot of that. Um, hmm. So he's taken real issue with people saying basically she's dealt with enough for it. He's got some interesting arguments. He says he bears her no ill will. Um, oh, let's deal with this right now. So he doesn't include it in the article. You could go find it. Well, it's in that BuzzFeed one. I've seen it before, but she makes an apology. She says it was a joke and not in the way you guys are probably thinking. She claims, I'm gonna try to explain this. It was a joke about people who would take that as a joke. If like there are some people, probably more than we realize, who would say a thing like that and mean it just as it sounds as a joke, right? Her point was that she was being ironic, like she was making fun of the kinds of people who would make that joke and find it funny. I hope that makes enough sense. So, like, part of what this guy says, because I scrolled through this before I looked at it, he says, and actually, it'd have to be in here somewhere. Oh, that's a long article. Anyway, he says at some point, you know, part of her defense is she was trying to be ironic because it was only for her followers, but that she should not have assumed it wouldn't basically go viral. And that's actually pretty goofy because who among us would assume anything we say, even in 2022, would go viral? Like, no one assumes that. Um, so yeah, like, again, I'm trying to think of a good way. Like, basically, she says she tweeted it for the people that know her sense of humor, know that she wouldn't mean it like that. Um, and he says that's you can't do that anymore, and she should have known better. As I mentioned last time, I don't particularly care for the argument anybody should have known better. Usually, that's not the case. Like I say it to my 6-year-old sometimes, I catch myself and I'm like, he doesn't know better. That's why I'm having to tell him. Like it's that's not a real argument. But again, in our paper, we're not so much disagreeing with these guys, even though like I disagree with this guy in this particular case. What's more interesting is this is an opinion a lot of people have. So again, this is part of the reaction. This tells us a little bit about us as a people, a society, a culture, that we feel like this person should have known better, that we feel like she should have been able to kind of assume how this would have gone, basically, right? And why is that? What does it say about us? I mean, does it say that we are such sort of like a connected culture, sort of technologically, that you have to now take that into account, that it's just part of our everyday? Maybe that's the start of some kind of an argument. I mean, again, though, this is in 2013. That was very different from 2022. So it's just odd that somebody would make that argument then. Let me get the Lexus off the screen. It's distracting. Um, I mean, too, I guess another part of his argument is she should have known that there are certain things that you just can't joke about, even if you are joking about the people who would make that joke. Like in one of her apologies that he's kind of referencing, she talks about South Park. Some of you may be familiar with that show. Some of you may hate that show. It's pretty divisive. Um, but it's a fair example from her. Like that's kind of a show that's known for that kind of humor, not necessarily making fun of the ways it's. Again, I'm trying to. It's being ironic. It's making fun of the people who would find the thing it's doing funny, right? It's making fun of itself in a way. Maybe that's put better. Um, and her point is people know South Park is a joke, so it works. And what she didn't realize, she says this in one of her apologies, is that her statement would be taken at face value. And that's an interesting point too. That again, he kind of shoots down, but like if you're on Twitter, for instance, and they've upped the character count since then, I can't remember the number, but you only have so many characters. Is it fair, first of all, to assume people are going to know the context of your tweet? Or do we now just have to assume that everything is without context and everything is taken at face value? Um, and again, whichever one of those you feel like is true, what might that say about us? You know, like, I mean, the way people reacted to what she said, if you take her apology as legitimate, like she means it, doesn't that say doesn't one argument that presents itself as like we're not interested in context, we're not interested in sort of finding out whether or not a person meant a thing in a certain way? Do you know what I mean? Like one of the big problems with text messaging is tone, and some of you may have experienced this. Tone can be really hard to judge because it's just text. How many times of your life, whether it's a text or whether it's on Twitter or something like that, have you gotten something from someone or read something and said to yourself, do they mean it like that, or is it a joke, or that like because you can't read the tone, you can't know, because you don't have the proper context. It seems like one idea here might be that maybe that's a thing that's just going away, and we don't use context anymore. We kind of assume uh, it doesn't matter, or do we assume the context we want to assume? Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, we all have certain biases. Do we read a thing just according to how we want to read it, as opposed to other possibilities? Do you know what I mean? Like, to bring it back to this example, the two possibilities that really present themselves are either she meant it the way it was just written, with no sense of irony and no, I mean, she just meant it like that, right? And that's how everybody read it. And if that's the case, then like, you kind of get what you get there. The other possibility is she did mean it ironically. She did mean it as a joke about a joke. Um, and if that's the case, is that just kind of too high-minded for us, Um, I'm not sure, but that's kind of the conversation we're trying to have in this particular case. Um, Another way to think about irony, because I know some of you don't know what that is. Um, the way irony will usually work, like if you're familiar with The Onion, for instance, um, you make a joke that's so blatantly outrageous, that's so bad, that it's obvious it's a joke. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, if she feels like she was being ironic, she's basically saying the thing I said was so insane, so ridiculous, that I thought people would recognize that. And again, I feel like that's fair. Like, with how irony works, it seems like at least a legitimate possibility. But again, what's interesting is as a society, we don't acknowledge that maybe that is what happened. We always seem to kind of go for the jugular, kind of go for the worst possible uh, assumption, I guess, about a particular thing, right? Like sometimes that assumption is correct, but I think a lot of the times it's probably not. So again, in this particular case, what might it say about us as a people, a society, a culture that we do that, right? All right, a little bit of brainstorming. I'm kind of worried. I don't have any. Oh, I only have that open. All right, let's do this real quick. Quick being the optimum word. All right, my laptop is not working very well today. Pretty sure it's my wife signed in, so that's not good. Let's see. Yep, that's my wife. Hooray. All right. Let's just go to a document. This part, like I said, I want to do rather quickly because it is just me talking at you. And also, we live in different worlds. So, whatever you guys might be interested in, quite honestly, might miss me entirely and vice versa, right? I'm going to put Sacco at the top if it will let me. Can we? There we go. Along with that, I'll list our guy from last time, Carlton Davis. I mentioned him in the last video. I'm going to go ahead and say you can't use either one of those people because I've talked about them. But you can easily find people that have sort of screwed up in similar ways, right? Beyond that, a couple other people I came up with personally, and again, I'm just you and I occupy different orbits. A guy named Bill Maher, he's been on TV for decades. I remember my dad used to watch him when I was a kid, so like he's been around for a minute. Um, he, how to describe what he did? It was a couple years ago. I think because I saw the clip. He was trying to make a congressman uncomfortable, like a white congressman, conservative. He was trying to make him uncomfortable, and he used the N word in a joke to the congressman, and it worked. Like it definitely made the congressman uncomfortable. Um, but Bill Maher is also a white guy using the N word on TV, so it definitely did not go well for him for a little while. There were calls to cancel his show on HBO. Um, and I mean, it lasted for about a week or so. Because he has a weekly show. So then the next week, Ice Cube actually came on to his show uh, in full NWA garb, which was interesting. Uh, Many of you probably don't even know maybe who NWA is, or was, but Ice Cube used to be a hard motherfucker. I know some of you aren't maybe a fan of that language, but that is the most accurate way to describe Ice Cube in the 90s. Um, and he came on like that, and he basically told Maher that he just got too comfortable, which I thought was a really measured way to think about it. And here's what I mean by that. I know I'm dwelling on this one, but only because you guys don't know who this is. So many people, again, this kind of takes me back to Sacco in a way. When Bill Maher said this, he used the N word on TV, which again, not a good idea. You could also, I think many of us are so dialed into how this works now, we know how this will go. Immediately, people are calling for his job. He's racist, all these things. And look, to entertain an argument, you have to, that's possible. It's possible that he is. Like, we have to allow for that, okay? But what are the other possibilities? When I say Ice Cube comes out and gives a very measured interpretation of what Bill Maher did, I tend, my own bias, I tend to trust what seems to be closer to the middle. Is it likely, for instance, that Bill Maher and what I know of him with his career and like political views he's espoused and all these things, is it likely that he's just secretly super racist and he finally slipped up on TV? I mean, no. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? No. So what are the other possibilities? When Ice Cube comes out and tells Maher to his face, like they're just sitting, across from each other talking, when he tells him that he got too comfortable, that's really interesting to me. What does that mean? I mean, it means Ice Cube is basically saying, like, there's still certain things that cannot be said by certain people. That word in particular, right? And Mar, I get when you say he got too comfortable. Ice Cube is insinuating that he considers himself an ally to causes that would find that word offensive, right? But an ally is being different is different than being actually the person who's like persecuted. Do you know what I mean? And if you get too comfortable, according to the argument Ice Cube kind of lays out, you can maybe slip into the speech of the persecuted, if that makes sense. So he's basically telling Bill Maher he should not have done it, but he understands. Like he's basically because Maher apologizes, he accepts his apology basically and says, you know, given everything else you've done and the views he's espousing all this, like he forgives him for it. He gives him a pass. That's a really interesting reaction. And again, it's not the one that Twitter had. Um, so you could think about both of those. Again, what does it say about us as a society that, given the Sacco, the Davis, or the Maher examples, all of them did this in different ways. We always seem to just assume. I mean, if you to remind you of Carlton Davis, people just assumed he knew what that word meant. They assumed he knew about the history of the Vietnam War. This like 22-year-old football player, they assumed he knew all these things, and it's like, man, I don't know. I don't know if that's a fair assumption, right? And when he pleaded ignorance, people doubted him vehemently. And again, it's like, but isn't that a strong possibility? Like, isn't that even likely that this kid who just grew up playing football in Miami didn't know? And they're like, no. And it's like, but what does it say about us that it seems like most of the time, our assumptions, I guess, to put it a little better, aren't just based around assuming people know things that we know, right? That's interesting. There's an argument there. Um, but also they should have enough knowledge for us to punish them, right? That's interesting as well. What does it say about us that it seems like that's kind of the mode we're most often operating in? Other examples I have, real quick, I'll just lay them out. We won't talk as much about them. I mentioned Roseanne last time. She did a bunch of crazy things. I mean, unfortunately, on the same note, Kanye West. It's funny here. I had this thought when I wrote him down. I've had students write about him in the past. It's been a little while actually since I taught this class. He's doing new crazy stuff. So if any of you were to write about him, it'd be totally different papers from what I've received in the past. He kind of has a really long career of doing the things that he does. I don't know how else to put that. Um, Other people, she's been in the news lately. And then this one I wrote down to actually say you probably can't write about him. If somehow people aren't familiar with Bill Cosby and what's going on with this guy, um, I the only way, um, I just lost the name. Oh no. Oh no. Oh yeah, I got it back. Either one of these guys, you could write about one of them, but I think you'd have to be careful because they unfortunately did the things that they did for a really long time. So there's a lot of information. You'd have to pick a particular incident. But you could think, I mean, what's interesting with these last two cases, everybody else caught all kinds of flack pretty much immediately, right? And in some cases, these last two, they have support as well. Like, especially Britney Spears recently. For years and years, that was not the case. So that's interesting. These last two people, I mean, Bill Cosby was decades of doing terrible things to women, um, and only very recently, some people would argue maybe with the advent of social media, was public outcry enough that he was kind of brought to justice in some way. Um, but then there's still conversations about. There's a really funny bit from a show that I forget the title, but they're kind of talking about Bill Cosby, and somebody says like, ah, but he was like exonerated in this one instance, and it's like dozens of women. So like anyway, but the joke is that then this lady goes, does that mean I can go see him at whatever theater next week? Like that's an interesting element of the conversation, right? Like we have this idea with artists, comedians, artists, people like that, R. Kelly, for instance, that if they do this awful thing, you have to cancel them, but that also means you can't listen to their music. Like Michael Jackson has been a similar concern lately. Um, what's that about? That'd be an interesting paper to think about. Not, again, I want to be very clear about your assignment. You're not saying that we should or should not cancel a person, that we should or should not, for instance, not listen to Michael Jackson's music, R. Kelly's music. We're not saying that. What I would want you to do is think about, and you can find research on this. Look, I'll Google it right now. Look at that. People are talking about that for sure. So you could read about their opinions first. But my question would be, why is that even a conversation? Like, I understand if you're streaming the guy, he's getting some money from it. So there's that. But say you're older like me and you just have stuff downloaded, you know? He's not getting any money from that. Um are you allowed to listen? A lot of people would say no, but why? Again, what does it say about us as a people, a society, a culture that that we're moving to cancel these people, but depending upon what person you're talking about, the ways in which we're moving to cancel them. Like on some level, a lot of people are arguing we just got to mute these people entirely. Like basically scrub them from existence. Do you know what I mean? Why? What is that impulse? And again, I think some of these people will dig into that. I mean, look, you look at the first line of this and like Jesus Christ, convicted in sex trafficking. Um, but going to jail should be enough, right? I mean, if you're thinking about classically speaking, the justice system, he's accused of a crime, he's found guilty. That's what jail's for, right? Like that's how that works. It's kind of weird historically to say, ah, but we also can't listen to his music. Like that that's a very new thing for the most part. R. Kelly's sultry music. That is a very interesting way to put that. But anyway, if I were writing about him, I would absolutely look at this article. Um, they're going to give you, again, talking about what he's done. Hey, we're still signed in. I don't know why. They're going into his music a lot because Medium is a music magazine. Um, all right, this writer says break his CD in half. But she also makes the point, I think it's a she, I don't remember the name, that this isn't real justice, right? Like this isn't it. So there's the idea too that if all you do is not listen to a person's music, are you really doing any good, or is it for show? These are all questions you guys are going to have to entertain. Again, depending upon who you write about. When it comes to the assignments that we're doing right now, sorry, my throat is really struggling. You have revisions due on Friday. If you're interested in that opportunity, I think many of you should be. You turn those in on Turnitin.com, by the way. But then for next week, you have proposals. Obviously, the thing due this Thursday is your pre-proposal. That's just discussion board. I want you to post a bunch of people. Like I wrote more people down, but again, I didn't want to just keep talking at you. This is my little list. I imagine for many of you, your list will be different. Totally fine. Um, but get a little bit of a list going and also talk about some of them. I mean, if your list is this long, you don't have to talk about everybody, okay? But give a little bit of background, what they did, what the reaction was, because really that's our text, whatever the reaction was. And if you have some thoughts about why you think we react the way we do, right? Go ahead and give those and talk to each other about, like, if you read somebody else's post, you're like, "Oh, I forgot about this person. Yeah, what about this?" And like, uh, the best thing we can do right now is try to get this conversation going, um, with all these different possibilities. And then for next week, you'll turn in your proposals, and we'll sort of officially start writing these papers. All right. I hope all that clears it up a little bit. Again, this whole week is really devoted to just what the assignment even is, because I know sometimes people have trouble wrapping their heads around it. Um, Once we actually start the writing process, with the pre-proposal and the proposals themselves, I think it'll be that much clearer. But again, the first step is trying to maybe make a short list about possible texts, whittling that down, picking somebody, and then rolling from there. All right. I hope everyone is well. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.